the overall total of registered farmer with RADA is over 220,000 farmers all across the island.
What would have accounted for that spike that took place recently?
What accounted for the spike, I would say, is persons lost their jobs, and the next best option would have been to go into farming because persons still needed to eat food in the pandemic period. So going into farming, persons still are purchasing their food, persons still need to feed their family, providing for their household is a way of cutting back costs as well because they weren't earning an income at the time. During the pandemic period, COVID-19, which is from 2020 into early 2021. And at present, the overall total of registered farmer with RADA is over 220,000 farmers
All across the island.
all across the island.
What would have accounted for that spike that took place recently?
What accounted for the spike, I would say, is persons lost their jobs, and the next best option would have been to go into farming because persons still needed to eat food in the pandemic period. So going into farming, persons still are purchasing their food, persons still need to feed their family, providing for their household is a way of cutting back costs as well because they weren't earning an income at the time.
So what are some crops that are doing very well for us in terms of supplying locally and even export?
One of the major crops that is doing well, I would say, in Westmoreland is pineapple. We have seen the continuous increase in production of pineapple, and that has been drawing a lot of new entrant farmer. Dasheen as well, because that is also being boosted by the Ministry of Agriculture under the Productive Input Program. So that is a way of helping farmers to boost their production so that they can satisfy local demands.
So you just mentioned two, and you said specifically for Westmoreland, pineapple and dasheen. Is it that RADA would specify based on your parish and location, this crop will do well? Like you give us that kind of advice?
No, not necessarily. What happened is that the farmer, it is the interest of the farmer to decide which crop would do best for them. However, RADA will guide this farmer as relates to the soil type that they are currently using or that they will cultivating on. So the soil type, the topography of the land as well as the nutrients that is within the soil. So you have to do a soil test to determine which crop will go best based on the nutrient content of the soil.
So in terms of doing that assessment and those tests, is it something that's done for free?
It is done for free up to, I'll say, 2021 into 2022, but there has been a cost attached to it now. And that is being done primarily through FirstSun at the present moment.
Okay. Now, what would be the benefit of actually registering with RADA as a registered farmer? What do you offer?
All right, so registering with RADA would give you a great initiative in benefiting from the government's program. Say, for instance, there's a PIP program and you're doing dasheen production or Irish potato production. You can benefit from input relief such as fertilizer input, agrochemicals to combat pest problem that you might encounter. Also, it gives give your input into a database. So we have a database that records all the farmers that we register with RADA. So transporting your produce, if you are stopped by a member of the JCF, then they have the ability to check the RADA website to see that, hey, I'm a registered farmer and I produce X, Y, or Z, and I'm not really someone that will steal farm animals or produce. So your data will be there so that you can easily transport your produce to and from your customer or your marketplace.
You know, I like that he brought that up. Now, when I was driving from Kingston to get here, there's a particular state of emergency happening in St. James. I'm driving through St. James. It's night, and when you reach the stop point or the checkpoint, you have to wind down all your windows, you turn on the headlight, and so the officer is looking in the vehicle and he sees my suitcase and he goes, you know, lady, are you running away? And I said, no, I'm going to host a conference. He's like, this is a lot of suitcases. How I know you didn't steal anything and any animals that in there? And I was like, it's not goats, it's clothes. You know, but he's like, you know, predial larceny is a thing. What if I had some goats and I'm not a registered farmer? What would have happened?
Well, I think it is stated in the law that the police can take those produce from you.
And they would arrest me as well?
I think they will hold you until you can provide proof that you actually purchase it or you are a registered farmer and you indeed purchase those, and you indeed produce those produce or animals.
But let's say, legitimately, I had 2 goats at home in Stony Hill and I was bringing it to Throp here. And I had an open back van and I wasn't trying to hide it. Is that okay? It's just 2, it's not like 15.
I think based on the current situation with farm theft, I think you will have some difficulty in transporting those animals. So you would have to be very convincing in speaking or explaining how you come by those animals to the officers in charge.
All right, I'm going to leave that part alone now. Now, in terms of, you mentioned some of the benefits of being registered with RADA, benefiting from the importation of fertilizer and things like that. So is it that we don't do fertilizers? We don't have any company here doing fertilizer in Jamaica?
Of course we do. And let me backtrack a bit. One of the main benefits of registering with RADA is the technical advice that is being provided through the extension service of RADA. So that's the main benefit of registering with RADA. However, as it relates to chemical company, we do have Firsan that produce fertilizer for our local farmers, as well as Avery's Organic that also does organic fertilizers for local farmers.
Now, growing up back in the day, a lot of the older farmers were not using all of these types of chemicals. Why is it that RADA is even recommending that we go this route now?
RADA isn't really recommending it, but if you're going commercial agriculture, you're going into it for profit. And you have to be able to meet the demand of your local market. And in order to meet the demand, you have to be able to add back nutrients to the soil, and therefore you want to add the necessary nutrients, and therefore you have to purchase agrochemicals such as fertilizer to add back to the soil. You can also add animal manure or organic matter to the soil as well. But most persons that do organic farming tend to do it on a smaller scale when compared to commercial agriculture, which will require a lot more chemical in order to rejuvenate the soil.
So are your farmers complaining about that they don't want to go that route, or they are taking it up quite readily?
You do have persons who are taking it up gradually. They are producing crops on organic soil. But I would say going organic, you have to find your niche market. Persons are going the healthy way nowadays. So they don't want to see any chemical residue. They don't want to know that you're spraying every week or every day. So it is best if you can go organic, and I think you will have a better choice of satisfying the market. And person that goes organic as well normally tend to fetch a higher price for their produce.
Okay. Now, in terms of any local diseases that might be affecting specific type of plants, are there any that we should be aware of generally?
Well, we have our extension team that goes about doing pest and pesticide surveillance. So one of the key pests that we are looking for now is the Mediterranean fruit fly, or medfly, that affects our mangoes and other fruits such as apples or guava and stuff like that.
Right throughout there, is there a specific time period that we notice that they're prevalent?
Normally, well, it has not been confirmed in Jamaica, but normally we do a survey during the production season of fruit trees, such as mangoes, so during the blossom period over into the ripening period of the fruit.
Okay. Now, sometimes when we're overseas, we might see a plant that we like or something that we like, and we want to take it here. But, we're not supposed to take it here. Tell me some of the reasons why we shouldn't try to sneak in any seeds or stems or things that are not approved.
All right, so you're not supposed to sneak in any...
I'm just saying, tell us why.
You're not supposed to sneak in any plants or plant parts or seeds, because for one, you can sneak in weeds that can become invasive and hard to control. You can also sneak in pests that can be devastating to our agricultural sector as well. So you can wipe out an entire crop of fruits or vegetables, whatever it might be. Also, pests, weeds, as well as animal disease or animal parts, those shall not be sneaking as well, because they can be devastating to the sector.
So not because, I have a personal preference, I have to think about the greater good.
Exactly.
Now, in terms of the feasibility of being a farmer today, are we seeing younger farmers being registered, or it's still, persons over a specific age?
All right, so for Westmoreland, I can say that most of our farmers are over the 55 age group. So what we are seeing is an increase in the age limit of the farming population. So we haven't seen much young farmers entering farming, but we do see one and two. But what can we do to encourage those farmers, those younger farmers, or new entrant farmer, is to let agriculture become more attractive. Younger farmers tend to be more technology driven. They want to see more technology in the sector and how the technology can make their job or their function as operating farmers more easy.
So, right, so, let's say my family left me some land and I want to do hydroponics, or I want to do a greenhouse. Are there any government grants that I can apply to? Does RADA help me with sourcing funding for that type of thing?
RADA does help with sourcing of funding for those projects, and normally we get funding through JSIF, sometimes the FAO and the EU as well.
All right, is there a time period that you get these types of funding? Is it something that is recurring annually?
No, it's not an annual, sometimes it's one-off, so I cannot specify until the exact time period that those funding normally comes in.
In terms of being a registered farmer, what are some of the requirements?
Okay, you have to, first of all, have access to land, which is a key one. So you can either lease or rent land, or you can be a landowner or a title holder. Two, you need to have at least one square chain of active production.
One
square chain, or 0.04 hectare.
Okay.
Yes. You can have 5 heads of goat or sheep, 2 pigs.
Per farmer? 5?
Per farmer. Farmer. I can have 6 colony of bee.
Colony of bees. Okay. Mm-hmm. So those are the most basic requirements.
Basic requirement, yes. And so just bring your ID, TRN, and have an active farm, and then you can be registered.
Since you've been working with RADA, tell me a success story or something that has resonated with you so deeply, why you continue to do the work that you do.
There has been several, first of all, you have Farmers Group. Working with Farmers Group is a very important aspect of rural development, and RADA take it very seriously. And we have the home economics section of RADA that continues to work with these rural women particularly. And they have been developing their product, and they have found market for those products. And some are even looking now to export those products. So those are some of the success stories. The resuscitation of farm road as well is another success story, where the government is currently repairing farm roads in order to have greater access to these farming areas, so farmers' produce can move easily in and out. So the inputs can move in and the produce can move out.
So you mentioned a while ago that you help farmers to find markets?
Yes, we do.
Is that at a cost?
No, it's not. So we also have a marketing unit, and the marketing extension officer is the person that is responsible for helping farmers to find market, whether it be local market or export market.
All right, well, this was so fruitful. I don't really have any more questions, so we're going to go right into the Q&A segment. So you know the drill. Oh, look how I thought he was going to ask the first question. Okay.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I may have missed this, but what crops are the best to grow? The issue that a lot of people have, especially young people like me, is you want to grow crops, you want to be invested in having a farm, but we have the elements to consider. There's drought, there's flooding, and then obviously depending on which area of the island, for example, I don't know about Westmoreland, but I know like in St. Elizabeth it has a tendency to be very dry, very hot. So what's your advice?
Well, in terms of best crop, that would be difficult to
Say Westmoreland.
Say Westmoreland, we still have to take several factors into consideration when determining the type of crop. First of all, you have to determine the soil type, the nutrient content of the soil, the topography, the history of the location. If you have been growing, say for instance, Irish potato on a particular soil, you want to know the pest or disease history of the soil as well. So what we do, we have our extension team that can come to you and help you to determine the type of crops that is best for you. We also have the marketing officer that helps you with cost of production. So he helps you to determine the overall cost of producing, say for instance, 1 acre of a particular crop, and that will help you to determine what crop. You will also, it is also recommended that you find an initial market first before you go into production.
So let's say she has the land in St. Elizabeth and she's interested. How long after you come and do the visit to do all of those tests will she get back her report?
I think it's within 2 weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks. Mm-hmm.
So no crops do well. All right. Say it's near a swampland.
It's a swampland?
Near the swamp, near the marsh.
So if it is near the marsh, say for instance, in Sheffield, dasheen is normally one of the crops that does well there. However, if you're planning on exporting those crops, the exporters may not want that type of crop during a particular period of time. They prefer to have a dryland dasheen in comparison to a wetland dasheen. The only time, or I wouldn't say the only time, but they normally tend to go for the wetland dasheen during period of scarcity. However, you can also do your vegetable on the marsh as well, such as your callaloo, your cabbage, and your sweet pepper. But as we mentioned before, you need to find a market before you select the type of crop that you intend on planting.
All right. Great. Next up.
Yeah, so kind of a follow-up question to the previous one. I know, historically we've had trade deficits, right? So we import more than we export. Mm-hmm. I've always seen that as puzzling to me because when I look around, there's no scarcity of land and fertile land, especially in some parishes. Why is it that we aren't producing as much locally so that we don't have to import as much as we're importing? And also a follow-up to that one is building a revenue stream for Jamaica from that, where we supply one of the richest countries in the world right now. The U.S. is right off our borders, right off our shores. Why aren't we tapping into that market? I have a business in the health and wellness space that leverages a lot of produce. And when I look at the labels, it's all coming from Mexico or wherever else. Why isn't Jamaica tapping into that?
All right, so that's an excellent question. I would say farming is very labor intensive, so a lot of persons are not venturing into farming, especially the younger folks. And those folks that are over 50 and older are coming out of farming. We need to make farming more attractive, giving greater access to lands to younger folks, going into the colleges, College of Agriculture, going into Ebony Park, going to Nakalva Polytechnic College. See how best we can get those graduates to invest their time and their knowledge in farming and help them to penetrate the US market, as you mentioned before. If we don't have the technology to drive the production, I fear that in several years down the road, then Jamaica will be importing probably 80 to 90% of what we really requires.
What is the government doing right now to encourage that? I mean, are there any subsidies that are given to people who want to go into farming? Because it takes capital to do a lot of these things, and maybe they may not be able to necessarily put money in people's hands, but maybe they could subsidize some of it through lowering the costs for some of the supplies that are needed to start a farm. Is the programs like that right now?
Yes, so the government is actively constantly negotiating with chemical companies or input companies such as Firsan and other companies to lower the cost of fertilizer, for instance, or agrochemical. Also, they have inputs subsidy under the productive input program. So you have to be an active farmer to benefit from that. So you need to enter the sector first before you can benefit. So under the input relief program or the productive input relief program, you have farmers be given fertilizer to aid in their production, chemical for their crop care, and even livestock to expand on their production. We also have a water harvesting, a water management unit rather, that aid farmer with climate change mitigation, such as drought and stuff like that.
Okay. So my final question is on quite the opposite of what you just talked about, which is organic farming. So no chemicals necessarily, and definitely not any other fertilizers that I see being used. How you talked about it earlier, but are there any organizations that certify that something is organic? In the States, the USDA, right, they have this arm of the government that actually regulates organic farming. And so you can't just say it's organic to be certified organic. My juice business only uses organic products, so we only go through certified suppliers. And in moving to Jamaica, I want to also go in that niche. It may be difficult because there is a price point, a price increase for that, or premium you pay for that, and there may be some education that's necessary. But how is that regulated right now? Do we just call it organic?
No, you don't. What I'll say is that it is difficult to get organic certification in Jamaica. Reason being, the farming activities or the farming lands are so close. So if you have your neighbor probably a couple blocks from you and they are using chemical, you have chemical drift, and if it is drift onto your crop, then it cannot be certified. However, we have Jome that is responsible for organic farming in Jamaica. I don't know how much in terms of certification they help farmers, but that's what I know as relates to certification of farms.
Another challenge I have is finding enough. So if I come with a business that is focused on organic products, will I suffer from not having enough or having a concentration of suppliers who then have a hold on the market, and I run the risk of being charged whatever because they're the only ones that could provide? How popular is organic farming, and is it growing or is it decreasing?
It is not very popular, but what I'll say is that we have the land that can be able to produce organic produce. And what I would recommend if you're planning on coming in is that you contract these farmers to produce what you need to drive your production.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Does Rada have a list that he could then, be connected to, or, see registered farmers who specialize in specific areas? Do you have anything like that?
Yes, through our database, then we can determine who is an organic farmer or who is practicing limiting or no synthetic chemical use.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Curious, you use this word a couple of times, hectare, right? What is that in relation to an acre? Because that was a question that was posed by one of my, friends.
All right, so an hectare is 0.47 acres.
All right, and then my next question, I'm curious. You said 5 goats and you're a farmer?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I remember when I said, I can only have 5.
So let me clarify. Yes, so that's the minimum. So you can for chicken, you can have between 50 to 100, but cattle, you can have 2. Bee colony, I think I said 6.
Oh, in terms of the minimum that I
The
can
minimum, yes.
Okay.
That's the minimum.
Question. Why can't farmers supply the hotels directly? And the second question is, do you have to go to a bigger person or a company, and if so, why?
All right, so farmers can supply directly to the hotel. I can recall when Azul was opening several years ago, they contacted me as the marketing officer to find a single farmer that could supply them with all their produce, their fresh produce. Mm-hmm. And that was very difficult. That was very difficult. And hence, that is why most farmers has to go through the purveyors or the middleman in order to supply a hotel.
Thank you.
So if you have the scale of production and you think you're able to supply the hotels, then I think if you approach the manager or the purchasing manager, then I think they could consider you. But you need to have the capacity to store and to supply the variety of produce that they require.
Are there any, from the discussions you know of, are they also looking for any type of certification? So not just being registered with RADA, is there, do they look for anything else from the farmers?
I think they look at the overall handling aspect, the post-harvest handling of the produce, in terms of not being able to have the produce contaminated while delivering to them. So they will come and they will check your storage capacity and stuff like that. Right?
That handled everything for you? All right.
Thanks. Good afternoon. I was wondering if RADA have anything to do with trying to repurpose cane land that is now pretty much, as we know, in Westmoreland defunct, and whether, I know a lot of that land is privately owned, but whether there's any program at all to try and repurpose that land for different crops.
All right, so the repurposing of agriculture, of cane land rather, is being done through the SCJ and the Ministry of Agriculture, not necessarily RAD.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you. And also, I wonder what responsibility farmers should have for the amount of over-nutrient that ends up in the rivers, that then ends up in the sea, that then becomes a problem for the reefs and fish production and things like that. Because as we know, there's a lot of extra nutrient that does end up in our river here locally in the Grill. And a lot of it is runoff from the farms.
Okay, so what we tend to do if we see any form of environmental contamination taking place is to have farmers go through a series of training in terms of how they handle pesticide, how they apply pesticide or fertilizer, and how they dispose of excess agrochemicals. So that's one way of dealing with it. Another way of dealing with it is to assist farmers in locating additional lands or separate lands that won't be able to contaminate the environment, whether it be the river or land or sea.
So, sometimes if it's a physical building, if you're doing something that's against what you're permitted to do, they might give you a stop order, a closure notice, that sort of thing. If you notice a farmer is in breach, do you do anything like that, a stop order?
Well, RADA wouldn't have the power to deal with issuing them a stop order. What we might have to do in such a case is to report the matter to NEPA, which will come in and probably give them a stop order to cease and desist from producing and to stop.
Improve, and then you can resume.
Resume. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or to cut chemical use altogether.
Good. All right. And for final question.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm sorry. Okay. So I may have missed it, but I have not heard much talk about technology in farming. And if it is that we're trying to encourage young people to get into that space, wouldn't that be something that we should be promoting? And if so, is there any incentives from the government, for example, to bring stuff in that regard? Greenhouse, hydroponics, drones, all of those kinds of things. I know RADA, once you're registered as a farmer, there are certain incentives that are attached to that. Does that contemplate technology in farm?
Yes, it does. For instance, the ministry is now pushing the new phase of agriculture, which focuses on food security, agriculture business development, climate smart technology, and export expansion. So under those programs, we are pushing the expansion of crops and livestock using technology in order to meet the demands for export. So we have programs coming on stream shortly as relates to crop production, animal production, greenhouse production, orchard production, and such like.
But are you hearing of, any incentives to bring in latest technology that can help?
Yes, because the ministry is pushing drone technology as well, which will be able to survey crop field, determine the nutrient content of the soil, what is lacking in the soil, and what is lacking in the plant as well.
Hey, Throp here. You just finished watching a clip from On Deck with Throp. If you want to watch the full version, you can click here. If you want to watch another video, you can click somewhere else. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.